Nobody stops a concert for a sign. Signs are everywhere at concerts. Handmade cardboard declarations of love and devotion and humor and longing, held up by people who want to be seen from the stage, who want the distance between themselves and the person on the stage to briefly not exist. Artists see them. Artists smile at them. Artists occasionally point at them from the stage with the particular warm acknowledgement of someone who has noticed and wants the person holding the sign to know they have been noticed. But nobody stops a concert for a sign. Nobody walks off the stage and through the crowd to the person holding it. That is not something that happens. On this particular Saturday evening in August 1996 in Lyon, it happened. And what happened after Johnny Hallyday stepped off that stage and walked through 40,000 people toward a 9-year-old girl in a yellow dress, holding a piece of cardboard, was something that nobody in the Stade de Guerlain that evening has ever been able to describe in a way that fully captures what it was. Some things exceed the available language. This was one of them. Lyon, August 1996. The Stade de Guerlain on a Saturday evening in late summer had the particular quality of a football stadium converted for a concert. The grass of the pitch covered with a temporary floor, the floodlights replaced by concert rigging with moving lights in amber and blue and white. The changing rooms and corridors repurposed as backstage areas, the entire structure reconfigured into something it was not designed to be, and which it accommodated with the indifferent flexibility of a large building that has seen many things and has no opinion about any of them. The evening was warm, the particular warm of a Lyon August evening that does not cool as the sun goes down, but maintains its heat with a slightly humid persistence. The air carrying the summer smells of warm stone and cut grass and the collective warmth of 40,000 bodies in a stadium. The sky above the open roof was the particular deep blue of a summer night in the south of France, not yet fully dark at 8 o'clock, still holding the last warmth of the long August day at its western edge. 40,000 people had been inside the stadium since the gates opened at 6. In the standing pit at the front left section of the floor, approximately 30 meters from the stage barrier, a man stood with a small girl on his shoulders. The man was named Philippe Armand. He was 37 years old. He had dark brown hair cut short, a slight build, wearing a pale blue linen short-sleeve shirt and dark navy chinos and white canvas shoes. He stood with the careful, planted stance of a man who has had a child on his shoulders for some time and has found the specific posture that distributes the weight most sustainably. On his shoulders, her small legs hanging down across his chest, her hands on top of his head for balance, sat his daughter. Her name was Zoe Armand, 9 years old, small for her age, with the particular compactness of a child whose body has not yet decided what it is going to be. Dark curly hair pulled back in 2 low pigtails with bright yellow elastic bands. She wore a yellow cotton dress with small white daisies printed on it, white cotton socks, and red leather shoes with a small buckle in her hands, held against her chest with both arms wrapped around it. A piece of cardboard approximately 40 centimeters wide and 30 centimeters tall. On the cardboard, written in thick black marker in large careful letters that showed the effort of someone who had practiced the letters before committing them to the cardboard, was a sentence. "My did died loving your music." The story behind the sign had begun 18 months earlier. Zoe's father, not Philippe, who was her uncle, had been named Mathieu Armand. He was Philippe's older brother by 4 years. He had died in February 1995, at the age of 38, from a heart condition that had been diagnosed 6 months before, and which had moved faster than the diagnosis had suggested it would. He left behind a wife named Claire and Zoe, who had been 7 years old when he died, and who had spent the 18 months since in the particular process of grief that 7 and 8 and 9-year-olds undergo. A grief that does not follow the adult pattern, that appears and disappears unpredictably, that is present at unexpected moments and absent at expected ones, that lives in questions rather than silences. Mathieu Armand had loved Johnny Hallyday with the particular devotion of a certain generation of French men for whom Johnny Hallyday was not simply a musician, but a temperature, a specific warmth that certain songs produced in certain years of a life that could not be reproduced by anything else. He had owned every album. He had seen every concert he could afford. He had sung along in the car with Zoe when she was small enough to be in a child's seat, and she had learned the words to 3 songs before she could read, and the association of those songs with her father's voice, singing them in the front seat of a Renault Clio on the road between Lyon and her grandparents' house in the Ardèche, had embedded itself in her memory with the particular permanence of early childhood associations that do not fade. It had been Zoe's idea to make the sign. Not Philippe's, not Claire's, Zoe's. She had announced it 3 weeks before the concert, standing in the kitchen of the apartment in Lyon's 2nd arrondissement in her pajamas on a Tuesday morning, that she wanted to make a sign to bring to the concert, and she had told them what she wanted. Boom. And Claire had looked at Philippe across the kitchen table with the particular look of a parent and a sibling-in-law who both understand simultaneously that this is important and that the importance of it is entirely beyond their ability to manage. Zoe had made the sign herself. At the kitchen table with a piece of cardboard from the back of a cereal box and a thick, black marker, she had practiced the letters on a separate piece of paper first. 3 attempts at the full sentence before she was satisfied that it was right. Then she had written it on the cardboard with the deliberate care of someone for whom each letter was a decision. When she finished, she looked at it for a moment. Then she put the cap back on the marker and said, "Good." The concert had been running for 1 hour and 12 minutes. Johnny Halliday on the stage of the Stade de Garland, wearing a deep cobalt blue slim shirt with the top 2 buttons open, dark charcoal trousers, black leather boots, a simple leather cord around his wrist. His graying brown hair, slightly damp from the August heat, had been doing what he had been doing on stages for 36 years, which was being completely and physically present in the music without reservation or self-consciousness. 53 years old, medium height, slightly broad-shouldered, the particular presence of someone whose body has learned over decades how to fill a stage without effort. The concert lighting was moving through its programmed sequences, amber and blue and white, following the songs through their changes. The stage lit at full intensity for the faster songs and pulled back to single spots for the slower ones. 40,000 people were doing the particular thing that 40,000 people do when they are in the right place with the right music on a warm August evening, becoming briefly one thing rather than 40,000 separate things. The individual absorbed into the collective without disappearing the rare and specific pleasure of being part of something larger than yourself, while remaining entirely yourself. At 1 hour and 12 minutes during the pause between songs, when the stage was lit in a warm amber and the crowd noise filled the stadium, a lighting operator in the control tower at the center of the floor swept a follow spot across the standing section in the front left. The spot crossed Zoe Armand on Philippe's shoulders. It illuminated the yellow dress and the dark curly pigtails with yellow elastic bands and the piece of cardboard held with both arms wrapped around it. "Me dad died loving your music." The lighting operator held the spot there for 3 seconds, then moved it. On the stage, Johnny Halliday had been reaching for his water bottle between songs when the follow spot moved across the front left section. He saw the sign, not because the spot had been held there. He saw it in the 3 seconds before the spot moved. The yellow dress, the small girl on a man's shoulders, the cardboard, the letters large enough to read from the stage at 30 meters. He read it in one moment with the complete clarity of something that goes directly from the eyes to somewhere below the level of thought. He put the water bottle down. His musical director, a man named Serge in a dark green t-shirt at the side of the stage, had already indicated the next song to the band. The musicians were positioned. The moment was ready. Johnny Halliday turned to Serge, said something quietly that the microphone did not pick up. Serge looked at him, then nodded once. Johnny Halliday turned back to the microphone. He looked out at 40,000 people. He said, "Give me a moment." 4 words in the microphone. The crowd produced the particular sound that crowds produce when something unscripted has just entered the evening. A ripple of uncertainty that was not quite concern and not quite excitement. but something between both. The band held their positions. The lighting remained in its amber warmth. Johnny Halliday stepped back from the microphone, walked to the side of the stage, spoke to the security chief, a broad man in a black t-shirt with a headset. The security chief looked at him, then spoke into his headset, then nodded. Johnny Halliday walked down the stage stairs into the standing pit. Here is what 40,000 people saw from their positions in the Stade de Galland at this moment. Their performer, cobalt blue shirt, charcoal trousers, black boots, walking off his own stage and into the crowd, moving through the standing pit with the security chief slightly ahead, opening a path, not rushing, simply walking at his normal, unhurried pace through a crowd that parted around him with a particular combination of disbelief and instinctive accommodation that crowds produce when something impossible is walking toward them. The crowd where he was walking understood what was happening before the crowd further away did. The ripple of understanding moving outward from his position, people turning to look, phones rising, the particular sound of recognition passing through the human mass like something in water. He walked 30 meters through the standing pit. He stopped in front of Philippe Armand. He looked up at Zoe and Philippe's shoulders. 9 years old, yellow dress with white daisies, dark curly pigtails with yellow elastic bands, red buckle shoes, the piece of cardboard still wrapped in both arms against her chest, her face looking down at the man standing in front of her father with the expression of a 9-year-old child who has entered a situation for which nothing in 9 years of life has prepared her. "Bonjour, Zoe," he said, his voice not in the microphone, simply his voice, in the crowd, to a small girl on her uncle's shoulders. Zoe looked at him. "How do you know my name?" she said. He pointed to the cardboard. "Your sign," he said. "Your dad." "What was his name?" "Matthew," said Zoe. He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "Matthew had good taste." Here is the first twist of this story. Johnny Halliday did not produce a large gesture. He did not announce anything to the crowd. He did not make Zoe part of the spectacle. He asked Philippe to lift Zoe down from his shoulders. Philippe lifted Zoe down. She stood on the temporary floor of the standing pit in her red buckle shoes, the cardboard sign now held at her side in one hand, looking up at a man in a cobalt blue shirt. Johnny Halliday crouched down, his knees on the temporary floor, his face level with Zoe's face. "Do you know the words to any of his songs?" he said. "The songs your dad liked." Zoe looked at him. "3 of them," she said. "He taught me in the car." He nodded. "Which ones?" She told him. 3 song titles. The songs from the Renault Clio and the Road to the Ardèche, and her father's voice in the front seat. Johnny Halliday stayed crouched at Zoe's level for a moment. Then he said something quietly to her that was not in any microphone, and that Philippe, standing beside them, later said he could not hear clearly over the crowd noise. Whatever it was, Zoe nodded. Once, with the seriousness of a 9-year-old who has been asked something important and has given her real answer, Johnny Halliday stood up. He looked at Philippe. "Thank you for bringing her," he said simply. He shook Philippe's hand. Then he turned and walked back through the standing pit toward the stage, the security chief moving ahead of him, the crowd closing behind him like water. He climbed the stage stairs, walked to the microphone, looked out at 40,000 people who had watched everything and heard almost nothing. He said, "That was Zoe. She came tonight for her father Matthew, who isn't here anymore. This next song is for Matthew. And for everyone here who brought someone with them tonight who isn't here anymore." He paused. "For everyone who is carrying someone," he said. "This is for them." Here is what happened next, and what constitutes the second twist of this story. He sang one of the 3 songs Zoe had told him, the one from her list that he chose to sing first, the one from the Renault Clio on the road to the Ardèche. 40,000 people were completely quiet for the first 30 seconds. Not the quiet of people waiting for something to start. The quiet of people who have understood something and are holding it. Then the singing began in the crowd. Not orchestrated. Spontaneous, beginning near Zoe's position in the front left pit and spreading outward. People who knew the song, finding the words. The words spreading from person to person the way things spread through crowds when the conditions are right. until by the second chorus the majority of 40,000 people in the Stade de Gerland were singing a song about loss to a 9-year-old girl in a yellow dress who was singing it back because her father had taught her the words in a car on the way to her grandparents' house in the Ardèche. Zoe stood in the standing pit with her yellow dress and her yellow elastic bands, and her red buckle shoes, and her cardboard sign held at her side, singing the words she knew completely, in the middle of 40,000 people who were singing them with her. Philippe stood beside her, with his hand on her shoulder, and looked straight ahead, because looking down at her was not something he could do in that moment. Here is the final twist. The one that came 3 weeks later. A package arrived at the apartment in Lyon's 2nd arrondissement, addressed to Zoe Armand. Inside a small cardboard box, wrapped in tissue paper, a cassette tape. On the cassette tape, a handwritten label with 3 song titles, the 3 songs Zoe had told him in the standing pit of the Stade de Gerland. Below the titles, a single line of handwriting. For Zoe. So Mathieu's songs stay where they belong. No name. No return address, simply the 3 songs recorded in a studio with a full band on a cassette tape in tissue paper in a small cardboard box. Claire listened to the cassette at the kitchen table in the apartment while Zoe was at school. She listened to all 3 songs. Then she sat at the table for a while. Then she called Philippe. She said only, he recorded them for her. The 3 songs. For her. Philippe was quiet on the phone for a moment. Then he said, of course he did. The cassette tape stayed in Zoe's room for years, on a shelf beside a photograph of her father. She played it regularly for a long time. On a small tape player on her bedside table, the particular warm hiss of a cassette before the music starts, the particular quality of a recording made specifically for one person that carries something that recordings made for everyone do not. She carried the cardboard sign home from the Stade de Gerland in both arms, the way she had carried it there. It stayed in her room for years, too, propped against the wall, the letters in thick black marker, careful and large. The cereal box cardboard slightly bent at one corner from being held tightly for 3 hours in a summer stadium. My dad died loathing your music, the truth. Held up in the dark by a 9-year-old in a yellow dress with yellow elastic bands and red buckle shoes. Thaler, and here is what this Saturday evening, in August 1996, in the Stade de Gerland, leaves all of us. A 9-year-old girl made a sign at a kitchen table with a black marker and a cereal box because she needed to say something, and the sign was the only way she had to say it across the distance between the crowd and the stage. She carried it in both arms through 40,000 people because the thing written on it was true, and true things deserved to be carried carefully. Johnny Hallyday saw it from the stage and walked off the stage and through the crowd toward it, because when a 9-year-old child holds the truth up in the dark 30 meters away, you do not wave at it from a stage. You walk toward it. You crouch down. You ask her father's name. He walks 30 meters through 40,000 people. He crouched on a temporary floor. He asked 3 questions. He sang one of 3 songs. He recorded all 3 on a cassette tape and sent them in a small cardboard box. Not large gestures. Precise ones. The distance between large and precise is the distance between doing something for the crowd and doing something for the person. Johnny Hallyday that evening chose the person. 40,000 people watched him do it, and in watching him do it, every single one of them thought of someone they were carrying who wasn't there anymore. Which is what made 40,000 people sing. And you, are you carrying someone tonight who isn't here anymore? Tell us in the comments. Because these are the stories that remind us that grief is not a private room. It is a song, and songs are better when 40,000 people know the words.